my Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get a city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1583 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Learn how to plan, invest, and live smarter. Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making his Toronto Mic debut is Jeff Silverman. Welcome, Jeff.
Oh, stop the applause.
I have a button for that. That's more of a morning zoo type thing here. This is a authentic, real talk, but it's a pleasure to meet you, Jeff.
And a pleasure to be here, really. Thanks.
It's a fun convergence of events that I was chatting with a gentleman named Derek Emerson, and he invited me to moderate a panel in I got to get the name of this room right, but it's a like a Mason's room at the Masonic Temple at 888 Yonge Street. And he's like, okay, Gary Topp has a book coming out. And he's like, here's the panelists. And I get the list, right? Colin Brunton's on there. I've had him on Toronto Mic now. Ivor Hamilton's on there. Of course, the other Gary Cormier's on there. He's been over. And then I see the name Jeff Silverman. And my first thought is, I need to get this gentleman on Toronto Mic before that panel discussion. It's like we're going to record our pre-interview here. So that's why you're here.
Great. Happy to be here, really.
So maybe we'll start with Gary, since this is doubling as research for when I moderate this panel. But please, can you tell us how you came to partner with Gary Topp at the Roxy?
I had been working with my brother in New York. I actually originally lived in London, England for 4 years when I graduated from the School of Visual Arts. And then I went from London to New York and worked with my brother for a while selling advertising, which was a horrible, horrible job.
Like in New York?
Yeah, in New York. What we would do is, I won't go into the whole thing, but basically...
You can do that. I got time.
Well, they put me at a card table and they put a whole bunch of magazines in front of me, and I had to go through the magazines and find ads. And then we would have a pitch where I would call restaurants, because one of my partners named Sheldon Landwehr was a well-known restaurant reviewer in New York. If Sheldon said something good, there'd be a lineup around the block. And if he said something bad, then the place would close.
Right. He was an influencer.
Right. But, well, before
in
they were
in the world of restaurants, right?
Right. So I was pretty good at sales. And we had this pitch where, Mr. Jones, I don't really sell advertising. I'm really the artistic director. But we had a problem. One of our ads dropped out, and we're about to go to press. Now, I know Sheldon is going to be doing a story on your restaurant. So I thought, gee, wouldn't this be great if I can take your ad, which I see in this magazine, and put it in our magazine? And I'll tell you what, Mr. Jones, if you do it, if you can help me, I will let you do it on an ill-forbidden basis, which means you can take it at this discount for as long as you want, keep it as long as you want at half price, and you can quit whenever you want. And
you are good at sales, because I'm about to open my wallet for you.
I could tell you stories where I've actually been chased out of restaurants with a guy with a hammer. But anyway, that's the other end of the story. So this story begins with me being able to do this. And then, of course, the trick was I would sell you the June edition, and we were in April. So when you called up and said, gee, thanks, but I don't want it anymore, we'd say, no problem, it's out. But remember, you're in the next 2 issues, because you started 3 issues behind.
Right.
So they were already out and being published. Anyway, that was the thing. I hated doing it. And then, of course, I would have to go out and collect if they didn't pay. And I can tell you a story which you won't believe, where I actually sold this guy on a whole page. And I had to come down the next day to get the artwork, and the place was not there. It was a hole in the ground with boarding all over it. I walked up and down the block 3 or 4 times. It was gone. Anyway, I had enough of that, and I decided I would move to Toronto because I had a girlfriend that I met and lived with in London for 4 years, and her parents lived in Toronto. So I came up and, we got together. I lived at her parents' house for a while, and I was new to Toronto.
And this is 1976 when you arrived here?
I'm bad at that. It could be 78.
My crack research staff has done some digging. They think it's 1976. So just so I understand, so before you go off to New York and then, London, New York, but you're an American. So are you, where's home? Where are you from?
In Brooklyn, well.
I can hear the accent.
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, which I always say is status without responsibility. Because I can always say it and people are impressed. But I really grew up mostly in Long Island, and then went to the School of Visual Arts for art training and, my university years. And when I got out, they had a special deal in those days, which was $99 round trip to London. They actually had another, Pan Am had a thing which was amazing, which was $199 around the world, but you can only go in one direction.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I picked the student thing, which was $99, and I went off to London.
Okay.
And I remember looking out the window of the airplane thinking, I'm on my way to Bizarro Land, because everything's going to be the same but different. And I went there, and I built a life there, really. I got
and you
job.
met a girl.
I met a girl there, and she was going to RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts. And anyway, we were together for all those years, and I had an uncle who was one of the founding people in Bally manufacturing, pool tables, pinball machines.
Of course, yeah.
And he flew to London, and he said, your mother wants you back. So why don't you come back and I'll let you run my company, my advertising agency in the States. Well, I couldn't say no to that. So I handed in my notice, and literally the next day there were 2 first-class tickets, one back to Toronto for my girlfriend and one for me to go to New York. I went to New York. My brother and I drove out to his estate. We had dinner, and he turned to me and he said, hey, I thought you were going to cut your beard and your hair. I said, no, you never said anything about it. He said, well, you can't get along with my friends that way. You'll have to go and cut your hair. And I said, forget that. My brother and I left, and I hadn't spoken to my uncle then for a number of years until he was on his deathbed. Anyway, so there I was in New York, and that's how I started working with my brother.
Okay.
And that eventually led me to Toronto, and that is where I met Gary Topp.
Okay, no, that's some great background. So it might be 1976, depends how good my crack researchers are, but at some point in the mid-70s, you find yourself in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And so tell me, how do you meet up with Gary Topp? I got to be specific because there's Garys. There's multiple Garys at play here, but Gary Topp.
Well, there was no Gary Cormier and there was no Gary Muth at the time. It was, for years, it was just Gary and I. I'm trying to think. I think I went to a movie, and that's where I met Gary. And Gary was in the midst of a problem with his 2 partners. They had started a company called Topsoil Film, and they were buying the rights in Canada to films like Hendrix at Berkeley and films like that. And the one of the partners was an accountant, and one of the partners, I don't really know what he did, but there was a fight because money was owed. I don't know whether it was tax, it was money owed, and they didn't have it. And they didn't like what Gary was doing. And there I was. I'm a pretty big guy. Gary's a small guy. So Gary said, well, look, will you come down and stand with me as we confront these 2 guys? And I did. And they left. They literally, when he said, I'm going to fight, I'm taking over this place, they left. And I've never heard from him again. Gary, this was the thing that first made me really respect him. Mm-hmm. He went to the bank and he paid whatever was owed on the company by himself. Well, I was a poor guy trying to make a living in Toronto, and I was impressed by that. And we sort of became, we were partners. We hung around together. But I guess after you hang around for a year or 2, you become partners. And all of a sudden, we started a company which called Deluxe Amusements, and worked together at the Roxy Theater. Of course, all I did was make sure the bills were paid, and I came up with ideas for promotions. But the guy with the knowledge was Gary Topp. And at the time I met Gary, he doesn't remember this, or maybe I have it wrong, but he was an editor in an underground newspaper here in Toronto. And that impressed the hell out of me. And he seemed to really care about what he was doing. He knew music backwards and forwards, and he was a wonderful person to join up with. He had all the skills I did not, and I didn't mind being behind him, making sure that the bills were paid and the promotions happened and whatever else. So that's how Gary and I got together. Eventually, Gary, we hired or became partners with Gary Cormier. Gary Cormier, Mr. Music, he would set up the band, set up the music, set up the lights. And it was a really great joining of those two because they both loved music. It's not that I didn't love music. I just didn't care enough about any particular genre of music or person. And Gary did. So we palled around for quite a while. In fact, at one time we had a radio show on Ryerson Radio called The Edge of Morning. And we did all the things I always wished to do. We called people in the middle of the night. We would read through papers and find some guy in Arkansas saw a flying saucer. We'd call him. And that's the kind of stuff we did for over a year. I made a deal with Shopsies, so we'd have a big platter of food to eat during the night, and we would be there in the studio. So that was one of the adventures. And, of course, the Roxy, which was an adventure by itself, because we would do just crazy stuff. We had beastoramas. We had a sexathon where we had the police come down and
the other police.
The real, the Toronto police. And they said, we're closing you down. You can't show these sex movies. And we said, what are you, crazy? We took them up to the projection booth and showed them that everything we were showing was approved by the Toronto Censor Board. They were just, they were Russ Meyer movies like Trader Horny or Come One, Come All, right? And so that was one adventure. There was one time when we got the rights to show the Idi Amin film. And we were contacted by the RCMP, who said they found out about you showing the film in Toronto. And if you show the film, they're going to take somebody and kill them. So you can't show it. There was a scene in the movie, a firing squad scene. They literally pulled up to the front of the theater. There were lineups, went up to the projection booth and cut out the firing squad scene. And we were able to show it.
Wow.
These are the adventures we had at the Roxy. At the Roxy, if it was cold outside, there was a lineup around the block. We would bring them hot coffee. It was quite an experience. When the government came in and said, you have to apportion a part of your theater for smoking, we put them at the front, so everybody in the back would have to watch the smoke rise. We just had a blast.
Well, I was just thinking, if you're doing a sexathon or whatever, Shopsy's Sausages is a pretty damn good sponsor for that particular event there. But the Roxy, okay, so please, and again, there for the listenership, there is a deep dive with Gary Topp in the Toronto Mike archives. You can go back and listen to Gary Topp. There's also a Gary Cormier, and I just talked to Colin Brunton was over here, and that's a pretty cool episode that ties into all this too. But please tell me, how does the New Yorker come about?
Gary and I wanted to do music. We wanted to do live music, and the New Yorker Theater was available. There was a guy who owned the theater called Bennett Fody, and they were showing sex movies, again, softcore, like Flesh Gordon. So Gary knew him, so we went and we met with him, and he was not, he was kind of a greasy guy. But anyway.
You'd have to be in that business, I think.
Right. So he rented us the theater, and we would put on, the thing about Gary was he was so ahead of his time. And this is what, made me just want to be with him and do stuff with him. He would look in the Village Voice, the New York Village Voice, and find up-and-coming bands and bring them to Toronto, which was genius to me because they all had a following, and he knew all about them. We had some amazing people there, I mean, as you know. And I would I really didn't know their music most of the time, and but the place would be sold out. So anyway, so we built a stage in the New Yorker Theater. The stage that's there now was built by us, and we were then able to put on music. So, we would put on shows, and again, always an adventure.
Now, the name of this book, by the way, I felt this way with Colin Brunton as well, because he's another guest that came on after I saw who was on the panel, and I got to talk to these guys. It's almost, I just have to tell the people, no shout out to Ridley Funeral Home required. Gary Topp is alive and well. He's doing great. He'll be at the book launch on December 1st. He hijacked my brain. It feels like we're memorializing a guy who passed away. Like sometimes I feel like let's remember Gary Topp and what he meant to us and what he did for this city. And it's like, oh no, Gary's still alive and well. So
it's pretty vital. I mean, the thing is, he's the original. You see, I like to follow people who know what they're doing.
Right.
And I've done that even after Gary. But Gary is the real thing. I mean,
yeah.
He loves and he knows what he's doing. And he's always had problems. The thing that's amazing about Gary is he's always had to fight the administration, if you want to call it that. When we showed movies, he would have to fight different companies. United Artists wouldn't let you put a movie next to a Paramount movie, or a Paramount movie, you couldn't. And he would go and say, these two movies don't mix. I want these. And since we had a 99-cent theater, some people, and God bless them, they would take pity on us or whatever, because they never made money. You don't make a lot of money on 99 cents.
Right.
So you'd either get a flat amount for a movie, $50 or whatever, or you'd have to pay a certain amount per ticket. And, Gary knew what movies to pick, always put them together, and that's how the Roxy came to be. It was quite special.
Tastemaker, if you will. So the name of the book, just because I can hear Derek Emerson in my head saying, you didn't name the book. He hijacked my brain. This is the new book from Gary Topp, and like I said, the book launches on December 1st. I'm pretty sure it's sold out, but I'll be there, and Jeff, you'll be there, and I'll be asking you these same questions over again. But can you name check, and I know you're not the music guy, but can you name check any of these like cutting edge bands that would have played the New Yorker?
We had the Police, we had the Ramones, we had, John Cale, we had the Burrito Brothers, we had every type of music. We had Cecil Taylor. I have a scrapbook at home, and in my scrapbook is a pipe stem. And the pipe stem is because we had Cecil Taylor at the New Yorker Theater, and he just, I don't know if you've ever heard his jazz, but it's just plunking on a piano, bling, bling, blah, blah. And a guy in the audience stood up and said, "That's not music, that's flagellation." And we had to drag him out. And as we dragged him out, he broke his pipe. So I kept a piece of his pipe stem.
You know what? I'm thinking Jim Shedden should put that in the Art Gallery of Ontario. It's funny. I was at the Art Gallery once at an exhibit that Jim Shedden curated. And I saw he had on display, like behind glass casing, Gary Topp's, not a Rolodex, but like an address book. Like this was an exhibit at the Art Gallery with Gary Topp's, an address book, and you can see his handwritten, like he'd have a name in there, like I don't know, he'd have Sting, and then Sting's phone number in there or whatever. And I thought that was pretty cool to see at the Art Gallery of Ontario. So shout out to Jim and Jim.
I didn't know that. That is cool. And
I hope, Jim, you're at this book launch on December 1st because it's right up your alley here. Okay, so let's get to the horse. So how does the Horseshoe Tavern come to be? Because you follow Gary to the Horseshoe Tavern from the New Yorker, right?
Well, I like to think we went together, but
right. Do you feel like the Garys has kind of like, because people, and I wasn't around, so I'm just learning by talking to interesting people like you, but now we talk about the Garys. But I don't hear the Garys and Jeff. You know what I mean?
No, the Garys came after me. Kind of. What happened was Gary wanted to do music, and that was great for me. I loved learning about it and being part of it. And we couldn't do what we wanted to do at the New Yorker Theater. Mm-hmm. And so we had this opportunity to take over the Horseshoe Tavern. And the story of that goes this way. Gary and I walked in one day, and there was a lot of drinking and, cowboy music. And I said to Gary, "What are we going to do to get these people out of here?" And he winked at me, and he took a cassette out of his pocket, and he put it on the sound system. And I swear, within 20 minutes, there was nobody in the place.
It was no longer a honky-tonk.
There was nobody in the place. And from that point on, we started bringing acts in. And
any memory of what he played? Was it like the Ramones or something? What would he have played there to get to that crowd?
On the music?
Yeah, like to get rid of the old country music.
It's funny you say that, because I just found some tapes that he made many years ago. I just happen to have saved them. And I mean, I don't know enough about music to describe him, but people loved it. And, the thing about Gary, I think his wife once said to me something like, what did you learn from him? And I said, well, one of the things I learned is you never cut off a song in the middle. He'll always wait for it to end.
Right. Don't truncate these jams. Yeah.
Right, because we'd be sitting in a theater, somebody else's theater, and they'd cut the music off in the middle, and, you'd see Gary twitch.
Because Gary cares. Like, I think this is the big thing about Gary Topp, is that he cares about the music. He wasn't going to book an act unless he believed in that act. He's not going to book an act because it'll fill seats.
That's right. He battled for everything he's gotten, and I'm not sure he's done.
No, I don't think he's done at all. No. Patti Smith. I want to shout out a few other names I saw. By the way, the Police, that was actually Horseshoe Tavern, right? Not the New Yorker. Okay.
Horseshoe Tavern.
Were you, and I know you weren't really the big music guy, but were you at this, I don't want to call it infamous, but this famous Police show, which I understand, and Colin Brunton confirmed this just last week, 15 people maybe in attendance to see the Police at the Horseshoe Tavern? Or paying customers, because you mentioned there were a lot of people there who were who worked there or were freebies or whatever.
Mike, I honest to God don't remember.
Don't remember.
Because the place was full or empty. I was the big guy. When it got to the Horseshoe Tavern, I was the guy at the door, and that sucked. I mean, it was my job, and I did it. But, one time we had some hockey players come in and kick the floor, kick my feet out from under me. And,
oh my God.
Yeah, I mean,
who was that?
When you stand at the front door, you better be ready for whoever comes in.
Was that Tiger Williams? Who the heck is doing that to you?
But I'll tell you another story about the Horseshoe Tavern. I've been with my wife now for 47 years. And how I met her was her and her friend tried to sneak into the Horseshoe Tavern, and she made it. Her friend didn't. I grabbed her friend, and she came over to help her friend. And we have been together for 47 years since that night.
Congrats, man.
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
I love that story.
And for everything I've ever done, she's been part of it since then. And with Gary, I'd say the same thing about Heather, his wife. I mean, he met her when we were at the New Yorker Theater, and I guess it was a marriage made in heaven.
Beautiful, beautiful. I won't bug you with this one, except that it's top of mind because I literally have the DVD in front of me. But this is the last Pogo documentary that Brunton made.
Yes.
Were you there that night?
No.
When the cop shut that down?
No. Let me tell you what I know about Colin Brunton.
Okay. Go ahead.
Colin worked at the Roxy Theater, and, he was quite good at what he did, whether it was being an usher or helping one thing or the other. But he had this love of film and love of music. And I think he was one of the people who was entered. There's a famous director. His name escapes me. You might know
Bruce
it.
McDonald.
No. He started a school for art for people who do film. And Colin went.
Lee. Okay, I can't remember.
If we said the name, we'd both know it because it's quite a well-known name.
Norman Jewison.
Yes,
that's it.
You said the name.
Yeah, because I did the research. It just came back to me.
There you go. And from then on, he went on to be his own man, and you got to respect him. He's become a real producer.
Schitt's Creek was a big hit.
Yeah, I if he was right here, I would hug him and say I really didn't like Schitt's Creek for Schitt's Creek, but it was, you know what? It was see, I have produced stuff, so I know that what it looks like and what it comes out like is really what you pin your hat on. All the rest of it is just,
Well, you just said if he was right here. Well, he'll be right there on December 1st because he's probably going to be seen next year.
We've spoken on the phone. I haven't seen him in years and years.
Wow.
But it'll be nice to see him.
So I am going to play a little clip of something that you created and produced that I'd like to talk to you about. In fact, enjoyed... No, it's just a bit. I could play a lot, but I'm going to play a little bit and then fade it down.
Okay. Twilight Zone.
Oh,
it was a good Twilight Zone, wasn't it?
It was.
Very
It was
interesting, posing the philosophical problems, of
Yes.
course, about being replaced by automation and so forth. Actually, at the end there, that robot was Robbie the Robot, very, very famous robot, was in Forbidden Planet, 1956, very, very famous science fiction film.
Yes.
And Ryerson was just telling me that Robbie was actually destroyed.
By the MGM prop department.
They destroyed him, and a fan rebuilt him from the original plans.
Yes.
So he's made TV appearances and everything. He was Robbie the Robot, the big
Robbie.
robot. Also, I don't know if you noticed in there, you probably did, but the security guard was a real dummy. First of all, Mr. Whipple says, well, we better get rid of that guy who punches the clocks, you know, and he'd be the first one to go, of course, you think, because security guards, of course, you know, a lot of people think sort of the bottom rung of society. And then, of course, you know, this guy in the film, well, films, I mean, you know, blacks had a lot of trouble there getting portrayed as anything but singing, dancing, happy-go-lucky numbskulls, basically, which is what Hollywood portrayed them as. And
Yeah.
I think that's certainly what Hollywood portrays security guards as, which I think is really unfair. I mean, you know, Ryerson's father was in the creme de la creme of the security guard corps.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm talking about. He was in the
I don't even want to turn it down. It's like this
Which
was
is-
podcasting before
I mean, it's-
podcasting. But please tell us,
As a
Jeff,
security guard, no, you can't.
your role. This is the all-night show, and that's Chuck the security guard. Bury me in some info on how this came to be, and remind youngsters what the heck this was.
This was an idea that when a TV station shut down, because all TV stations shut down around midnight,
Right,
maybe 1 o'clock,
right.
there'd be nothing but, you know, static. You couldn't watch anything. And for a long time, I wanted to do an all-night television show, and in fact ended up doing Canada's first all-night television show. I'm right now trying to find out where all my stuff is because I donated it to the Museum of Broadcasting, and they don't exist anymore. So I'm going to start looking around for where it is. But the story, and it really is.
But on that note, you might need a conversation just because he might have a clue, but I'm dear friends with Ed Conroy, who's also known as Retro Ontario, and he's actively looking to preserve such artifacts from this country's media
if you can give me his
history.
number.
Yeah, I will introduce you guys via email, only because that clip I just played was because somebody recorded it to VHS and Ed ripped it to his YouTube channel, and that's how I got that clip I just played. But please continue.
Well, let me tell you, I was shocked that I went on YouTube just a couple of days ago and said the all-night show, and it's there. I didn't put it there.
Ed Conroy put it there. Retro Ontario. He's an FOTM Hall of Famer.
Well, if he didn't, two people, Bob and Claire LaMarche, did, because they were the master control operators when we did the show. They were part of the small little crew that put that show on. Anyway, the story, and it's funny because you know how much it has to do with Gary Topp? His programming of the Roxy Theater was what I took and programmed on television.
I was going to ask you how we got from, Gary Topp to Chuck the security guard.
Well, Gary Cormier came along, and Gary Topp and Gary Cormier were very close. I mean, so was I. But all of a sudden, there were shows being put on, and I just had to make sure the ads went in the paper, or,
Right.
And there wasn't enough money for three people to produce music and make enough money to live. So I decided at one point I wanted to do something else. I really didn't feel, this was like New York again. I was there, I was important, but I didn't really want to do it. So I went off. I thought I was going to go to New York, but I visited Michelle, the girl I told you about, and I never went. I'm still here, and she's still with me. So I decided I got to do something. So I started looking around. I went to Moses Neimer, and I said, I want to do an all-night television show. And he said, okay, I'll give you an office, and you go research and tell me what you find. And I sat there. In fact, what he did for me was he said, I'm going to allow you to go in and watch the news being produced, the 6 o'clock news. And the producer of that news was Yvonne Fassan, so who eventually, was on the top of CTV and all that stuff. So, and Bell. So he let me sit there. I brought coffee. I made sure that if they needed coffee, I brought coffee. And I learned what the hell is going on in the control room. Who does the cutting, who does the shooting, who's the switcher. And that was a fantastic, I can never thank him enough. And so he didn't want it. I kept looking around, and I finally found there's a person who's no longer alive, one of my close friends now, Martin Onrot. And Martin knew Gary, and Gary knows Martin, because Martin was in the music business. And Martin knew Dan Iannuzzi, who was the person who owned, I don't know, Channel 47, MTV.
CFMT.
Yeah, which I loved calling MTV because nobody knew.
And shout out to Jay Gold, my buddy, Joel Goldberg, who was a very early VJ on, I can't remember what it was called, Anything Else? Whatever their music show was, they called it MTV.
It's funny because Jay Gold, that I know, has been my accountant for 40 years now.
That's funny.
And help Yuk-Yuk stay alive at the beginning.
Which we'll get to, Yuk-Yuk, yeah.
So anyway, make a long story even longer. Gary Cormier, Gary Topp, and then Gary Muth, all into music. I moved on. I wanted to do something else. Eventually found Dan Iannuzzi through Martin Onrot. And Dan said, well, as long as you make sure the commercials run, do whatever you want. And that was it. I gathered together two other people who were trying to do an all-night show, Errol Bruce and Michael Lennick. One was like a science fiction lover, but he knew how to do split screens and crazy stuff like that. And Errol Bruce was a thinker. He'd always come up with ideas. 90% you couldn't do, 10% were really good.
Right.
And it was also Errol who picked the music, which is the opening theme of the all-night show. And then we picked Chaz Lawther, who I saw at Yuk-Yuk's. And I thought, gee, who would if there was a security guard guarding me in the middle of the night, this is a guy I could trust. And so we hired him to be Chuck the security guard on this all-night show we were going to do.
Right.
And we took him into, Rogers had a little studio somewhere near Adelaide Street. I hardly remember. And we went into that studio and we tried it, and Chaz just didn't have the power. So we fed him sugar water. And the guy was like as if we'd given him cocaine. And it was too much.
That's the secret sauce right there.
And eventually we decided that somewhere in the middle was great. And he got along well with Errol and Michael. And so they would go off into their little corner and decide what they wanted to do live. And I would plan the rest of the show, which was Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, Car 54, Where Are You? All this old stuff that I loved. And then I went and found little shorts, because I noticed that in the movie business, they don't do that anymore. You used to be able to go see a cartoon, a short, and then the movie.
Right.
No more. Well, where were all these shorts? So I found them, things like the National Film Board, believe it or not, and just independent stuff. We had a film called Blowjob, where a guy walked off, he said, I've had enough of this world, I'm leaving this world, and he walked off into the distance with a handful of dynamite. And as he gets way far in the distance, he looks at the camera and he blows.
Oh, that's okay.
And he blows up like that.
For the blow up, right?
Like that. And the police showed up the next day. I got a call, we'd go home at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Somewhere around 8 o'clock, I got a call from Dan Iannuzzi. Did you kill somebody? I said, what do you mean? He said, we have the RCMP here in my office. Somebody said you murdered somebody. Well, it turned out to be this film. And there were many more like it. There was a film called Eurynome, where it's, a Greek myth where an egg opens up and the whole world comes out of an egg. And I got called again. Did you show a film where people are coming out of a woman's vagina? I said, so and the all-night show was amazing. I won't go on anymore. So that was the all-night show.
No, but it was so innovative and interesting. It's almost, I'm actually surprised that Moses didn't want that. It seems to fit the ethos of what he was building there at 99 Queen Street before they moved to 299 Queen Street West.
He told me music, movies, and news. That was their secret sauce. And they didn't change, and they haven't changed. And, Moses was great, but he had his moments. When the Comedy Network first started, Mark Breslin and I were invited to a meeting. We were shown who's going to take over, and we insulted them by saying, what do you know about comedy? Well, that really insulted her and insulted Moses, and so a fight began, and Moses called me one day and said, come and talk to me. So I went up to what they call the Eagle's Nest, and I said, Moses, what Mark wants in this thing, you don't care about. And what she wants, we don't care about. He said, you go back and tell, I'm not sucking anybody's. He said, you go tell your partner. And for no reason, I was escorted out of the building. I went back and told Mark, who immediately said, let's go to the newspapers. I said, no, I don't want anybody. I'm not particularly interested in telling everybody I got kicked out.
Yeah, Rob Salem would love that story.
Rob Salem, I got to talk to him because maybe he can help me.
Well, he was here, I guess, in the summer. He can help you out.
Wow.
Yeah, Rob Salem's like, I'm thinking of this Glory Days. Like, I think if we were describing this all-night show to youngsters who kind of missed the early 80s, because we're talking 1980, 1981, I don't know if they believe us, like that this is a thing, Chuck the security guard. And it was just
Canada's first all-night television show. Now,
that's amazing.
Every station has all-night television, right?
It's true, because I got a 22-year-old, and just, I don't think he'd understand the concept. Like, they used to play the national anthem, and then you'd either hear beep of like the colored bars or whatever.
No, we would stop it like
static.
Like that.
Oh, yeah, stations went off the air for the night. And you didn't with the all-night show, and totally wild. Okay, but it didn't last too long. Was it just too I was going to say too much for much.
Yeah, it was just under 2 years. And but we had, what happened was it was now 2 and 3 in the morning, and all the performers from Toronto had nowhere to go, nothing to do. So we had some amazing people come on and play instruments and play with us and talk to us. It was quite a moment. We had a scavenger hunt at the beginning of the show, and we'd list all the stuff we thought about. One of the things we listed was a fly. Where are you going to find a fly at? And we had a lineup around the block.
Love it so much. Man, I'm loving these stories too. So obviously you've mentioned the name now, Mark Breslin and Yuk-Yuks, and we will absolutely be getting there in a moment, although I have a couple more hits I wanted on my way there. But do you mind maybe we stop for a moment so I can give you a few gifts since you made the trek? Do you enjoy Italian food, Jeff?
Yes, I do.
I have in my freezer right now a large lasagna from Palma Pasta that you can take home with you.
Yeah, and you say it's not available in Toronto?
No, it's in Mississauga, so I mean, close enough, right? But and you know what? Now that somebody sent me a photo that you can get Palma Pasta in some chains, maybe Longo's or something. But absolutely, they got 4 locations in Mississauga and Oakville. One specific location I want to shout out is called Palma's Kitchen, and they're going to host us for an event on November 30th. This is the day before our panel there at 888 Yonge Street. It's called TMLX 17, the 17th Toronto Mic'd Listener Experience. Everyone's invited, and Palma Pasta will feed you. Great Lakes Brewery is sending over fresh craft beers, so you can grab yourself a can of Great Lakes beer. We love them. And, of course, we'll be live recording, so you could jump on the mic and say hi and get into the festive spirit, if you will. So that's happening November 30, noon to 3 p.m. at Palma's Kitchen in Mississauga. Jeff, you're invited. I don't know if you're around, available, but you are absolutely invited. We'd love to see you there.
Oh, Italian food, I'll try my best.
You know what? Are you a lasagna guy, a penne guy? You like the
I'm a
chicken
fettuccine.
parmesan?
I'm a fettuccine guy.
Well, they got delicious fettuccine for
Great.
you.
Fantastic.
All right, couple more quick gifts here. There is a measuring tape from Ridley Funeral Home. They're pillars of this community since 1921. Measure what you wish.
Is that so you make sure you fit the coffin?
Exactly. I haven't heard that one before. Okay.
You don't want your feet sticking out.
Well, when you have the president of Yuk-Yuks, you got to get some zingers in there. Okay, I also have a wireless speaker for you that Moneris sent over, and yeah, you can listen to some great music on that, but
Great.
Specifically, my friend Jeff, you are going to listen to Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open. These episodes are dropping now. This is an award-winning podcast from Moneris that Al Grego hosts. Al Grego will be at TMLX 17 on November 30th at Palma's Kitchen. He's going to help me with the audio. Oh, that's your alarm to say, I got to get to Toronto Mike, but we're already rocking and rolling here. It's okay, because I will tell everybody that the most recent episode of Yes, We Are Open has Al Grego talking with Neil Migalski, and they talk about the home gaming industry and the 60-plus year history of AVO Game Room. And again, these are inspiring stories of small businesses, and Al does a great job. So everybody should subscribe, including you, Jeff, and you have the speaker to listen to it on.
Fantastic.
Last tip before we get you back. In fact, I'm going to get you to the CBC here on our way to Yuk-Yuks. But I would urge all listeners, including you, Jeff, that if you have some old electronics, old cables, don't throw that in the garbage. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, put in your postal code, and then you'll find out a place near you. You can drop it off to be properly recycled. So those chemicals do not end up in our landfill. They're doing great work. Recyclemyelectronics.ca.
Fantastic.
What can you tell me about concerts in the park? You produced this for CBC.
Yes. It was after the all-night show. I needed to do something. Sure. I needed to make money. And I went around. Again, it's funny you remind me, because you're reminding me that Martin Onrot somehow got me a meeting, and I got a job doing concerts in parks all across Toronto for the entire summer.
Wow.
And, we had big bands, we had singers, we had the McGarrigle sisters, we had...
Now I'm thinking of the Log Divers Waltz. Right?
That? No.
Isn't that the Kate McGarrigle and aren't they the singers of the National Film Board of Canada's Log Divers Waltz? We go twirling down and down like water.
I've never heard them sing in English, but maybe.
Okay. I could have I could be wrong. Okay.
No, you could be right. See,
we'll find out later. I'll be fact checked on the live stream. Go ahead.
But just to tell you, I mean, I didn't pick the acts. Martin Onrot picked the acts, because
right.
What would I know? What would I know? And some of them were eclectic and some of them weren't. And you know what? It taught me a lesson, because it didn't matter. As long as they had a name, you could somehow find a way to make money with them. Now, that's not Gary Topp's way. He
Right.
has to love them and care about them. And so one of the things I did after I did concerts in the park, which were about 11 concerts, we had Manteca, I don't even remember.
Well, you had Rough Trade.
Yeah, we had a Rough Trade.
And I believe Gary Cormier was managing Carol Pope at some point.
Well, we didn't cross.
Yeah, I know, just a fun
wires there.
fact for the listenership. But Ronnie Hawkins, the Good Brothers.
yeah.
I've had Brian Good on the program,
Yeah.
the Good Brothers, and that sounds very cool.
Yeah, and we had, all of them come with a story. We did Ronnie Hawkins in Hyde Park, and we had Satan's Devils, and what are they called? The motorcycle gangs.
Oh, Hell's Angels?
No, Satan something.
Satan something, yeah.
And they were there in the park because their favorite guy was Ronnie Hawkins.
Of course.
And
course.
and Ronnie, he couldn't remember the names of anything. They had to put big sheets of paper on the stage for him to be able to know the words. He had his family. I think his son is part of his band. Anyway, it's very interesting.
But you know how guys my age know Ronnie Hawkins originally? We knew him as the guy in the fur jacket at Nathan Phillips Square on New Year's Eve who would be on City TV.
Yeah.
And with ever Gord Martineau and whoever else was up there, Ann Ruskowski or whatever. But yeah, we knew him as like the host of the New Year's Eve celebration at Nathan Phillips Square, which City TV used to air every New Year's Eve. But there you go.
Yeah, we had a comedy festival at Nathan Phillips Square where we had Howie Mandel, a number of people, but it was kind of a weird, comedy is a very strange thing. It's not a place where you want to give people comfortable seats, for example. You want to give them hard seats, because the more uncomfortable they are, the harder they laugh. And you got to stick them together. If somebody's got like 2-3 feet in between you and the next person, they don't necessarily laugh. But if you stick them really close together and one laughs, it's like kindling. They all laugh.
It's addictive, right?
It's amazing. So
it spreads like a virus.
So,
by the way, Satan's Choice. There's a
Satan's
ruling
Choice.
on the live stream that Jeremy Hopkins says it was Satan's Choice. And we believe it was Kate and Anna McGarrigle who did this very famous NFB short, Log Divers Waltz.
and just a little background there. Once the show was over and everybody loved it, apparently they sued CBC because they only contracted for Ontario and it was all across. I don't know.
National, of course, yeah.
So, but yeah, so that we did the concerts in the park. They were a lot of fun to do and amazing to see thousands, literally thousands of people out there. And, you know, I once did a thing at Canada's Wonderland, Michael Damian, who was on the
Rock On. He did the cover of Rock On. He was a soap opera actor.
Yeah, that's right. He was in
remember
The
this
Young
guy.
and the Restless.
Yeah.
And I walked out on stage to something like 6,000 people. And
Well, that cover of Rock On was a top 10 hit. I don't know where it peaked. I just had Andy Kim over. Rock Me Gently went to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. He wants you to know that. Absolutely. But this cover, I know Michael Damian's Rock On was a hit. Like that was all over Top 40 radio.
Well, we had to do a strange dance here in Canada because I'm trying to think of the name of the opening act and I can't. But anyway, for Canada, the show was about the opening act. And for America, it was Michael Damian with this opening act.
Right.
So,
I wish you could remember, and I wish you would tell me it was the Spoons.
No, it wasn't the Spoons.
Not the Spoons.
No. I did, however, go to a woman who had connections all over the world for material, Ismay Benny. I don't think she's in business anymore, although she's probably still around. And she was able to find me specials. Flock of Seagulls. I don't know. I can't even think of the names anymore. So I took 12 of them, sold them to the CBC, which they paid. It was the easiest money I ever made. And I took them, went into a studio, and just put Deluxe Amusements and my credit roll at the end of their credit roll.
Rock Deluxe.
Rock Deluxe. How did you know about that?
I came up in my effective research here, but I got a fun fact that'll blow your mind. Maybe or maybe not. We're just getting to know each other. But Flock of Seagulls has recently hired as a guitarist in that band the lead singer and founder of the Spoons, Gord Depp. So the Spoons and Flock of Seagulls are now like in the same universe.
You think I didn't know that, right?
You knew that, right?
I had no idea. No idea.
And then again,
I
Rock
like their
Deluxe.
name. Let's put it that way.
And I ran so far away. Don't ask me to name a second Flock of
What did I
Seagulls
need
song.
them for? You could do it.
And the way I sing it doesn't get picked up by the algorithm out to make sure I don't play all this copyrighted music. Little Feat, Brian Ferry.
Yeah,
these are some of the
wonderful.
big acts you had on this
And
rock, but the
Gary
easiest money ever made.
Gary loved Little Feat, and I got to hear them and get to know them because of that. Yeah, listen, he'd pick winners. He was a winner.
He knew how to pick the winners. The Ramones, the Police, these bands we're still talking about today. Okay, now you did a bunch of great work here. I'm going to get you to Yuk-Yuks here because I got some questions for you as Mr. Yuk. And we'll talk about, you mentioned you're retired. We got to confirm all this. What the heck's going on with your professional life here? But what did you have to do with these acts? Okay, I'm going to name some artists that I'd call these global A-listers. Okay, Billy Idol, Tina Turner, David Bowie, some guy named Michael Jackson. What the hell did you have to do with these cats? You don't remember.
I have a very good friend named David Bluestein, known to the world as Blue.
I know this guy.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, Blue was my partner in the all-night show because I wanted to do the programming and I wanted somebody else to do the business. And that was David Bluestein. So he would, it's funny because one thing I did that I always like to say is Chaz Lawther, right? So when the show started, as he was Chuck the security guard, for the first week, he'd come in, he would do the show. But the second week he came to me and he said, I can't come here by subway anymore. You're going to have to send me. I can't, I get stopped in the street. People, I can't get here. And so we had to, in fact, get him there by car. But then he wanted a raise. So I said to him, listen, you and I, we're all new in this. Right? We have this show which seems to be a hit. We're on every newspaper, headlines and stuff. Chuck the security guard and whatever. And Chuck was the kind of person where he didn't like being Chuck the security guard all the time. Like we said, hey, they want you to lead the Christmas
because
parade.
He wants to be a serious actor. I mean, a real actor.
Yes,
right?
and in fact he is, right?
Yeah, sure. He's still acting, right?
Absolutely.
Made in Canada. Yeah.
So anyway, he was. So I said to him, listen, Chaz, I want as much money as I can get. Right? I will promise you that I will always make $50 less than you. No matter what the negotiation is, I promise I'll always make $50 less than you. And that stopped any of the arguing, and we went on for the rest of the show.
Well, we know you're a good salesperson. Any interest in selling advertising on a very popular local podcast?
Not really.
Good, because I can only pay you commission and lasagna from Palma Pasta. Okay. So the Billy Idol, Tina Turner, David Bowie, Michael Jackson.
Oh yeah. So David Bluestein. After I got done with that, I needed a job.
Right.
And Blue said, "Okay, why don't you come work with me at CPI, Concert Productions International, right? Michael Cole, Bill Ballard, and so I was thrilled to do it, and that's how all those names came up because I was put in charge of signage.
Oh, for Molson.
Yeah, well, because the deal was Molson and CPI worked together,
Right.
So they needed signage. I had to go and put up signage, and. Okay, happy to do it. But it got me backstage of every show and meeting all the people there. And it was fantastic. In fact, my son, I have a son, he was 8 years old at the time. And we would climb to the top of the lighting towers and watch the crowds and watch, he once got hit by Joan Jett. Somebody threw an orange at Joan Jett and it hit her and bounced off and hit him.
And now he loves rock and roll.
Well, I don't think he ever got rid of that shirt. But now he's like 50-something. And
you always think you got to get a gig, you got to pay the bills, but these are cool gigs. If you have to work, this beats being on the assembly line, right?
You said it. And, in school, I said to myself, whatever I do in life, I just don't want to get up early. And I've always been able to do that.
And it gets a little better. So again, we're on our way to Yuk-Yuk's here. We're kind of there, but I'm going to ask you about your work at the O'Keefe Center.
Yeah, okay.
Because I know that you're
I was the
promoting shows there.
Well, I was the account director.
Okay.
And Martin Onrod was the general manager.
Okay.
Martin got a job as general manager of the O'Keefe Center.
Right.
So obviously I was able to work. So what did I do? There was an advertising agency that was connected with CPI. Len Gill owned it. I'm trying to think of its name right now. But it was an advertising agency. And I was made the account director for the O'Keefe Center. So then they brought in everybody, from Joan Rivers to, Disney on Ice.
Yeah, I see Sesame Street Live. I was a little old for it, but had it been maybe 10 years earlier, I would have been there.
My older brother's passed on now, but he came to Toronto, and I impressed the hell out of him because I introduced him to Nureyev. And this was a big thing in his life, right?
Wow.
So... But, this is, I met all these people and most of them are nice. Once in a while you'd find somebody that shocked you how bad they were.
Who's that?
What's the name of that Jackie Mason.
Oh, okay, yes. I know him well, but he was a voice of
I liked him.
Krusty the Clown on this. Krusty the Clown's father on The Simpsons.
I didn't.
Jackie Mason, yeah.
I didn't know that. But he played the O'Keefe Center, and there was a woman there who worked at Channel 47. I can't think of her name, but she did the Chai show, the Jewish show.
Okay.
Her name will come to me. But anyway, she was backstage. Mm-hmm. I was backstage. And she said to him, I would love you to come on my show. And what proceeded was 10 to 15 minutes of the most filthy, most angry. What the fuck do you think I'm going to come on your show for? I wouldn't come on. I'd never seen anything like it. She walked out like so embarrassed. So every once in a while you find people like that.
Every once in a while there's a jerk.
He is a jerk.
Yeah.
There was no reason for that.
Hopefully they're few and far between. But
they are.
Now, Mark Breslin, not a jerk.
No, not a jerk.
He's been here. So Mark Breslin's been in that same seat you're sitting in.
Yes.
And we talked.
I asked him because I never listened to podcasts. I didn't even know where you'd find them. I did find yours because I just went and said podcasts, and there you were, right? But when you first invited me, I thought I don't know,
like who's this guy?
Yeah, so I called around, and people said, no, great, he's great, and you should go see him. And Mark said, yeah, he's been here.
Yeah, Mark Breslin was great on the show. He's one of those older dads. I had just done an episode of Ralph Ben-Murgy, who was Ralph. older dad. Oh, so yeah, any Ralph stories? I just realized. So maybe we'll go like this here. So tell us about your relationship with Mark Breslin, like how you met him, and then tell us how you ended up working with him at Yuk-Yuk's.
Mark he's an avid movie lover, and he went to the Roxy, and we got to talking. It was that simple, and we became friends. he had a club on Church Street where he first started Yuk-Yuks, which was basically a bowling alley at the bottom of 519 Church Street, which is now the gay center, the hub of the gay community, apparently.
Sure.
And I went to see him and see the club, and that was it. And then one day he said to me, I'm opening a place on Yorkville, and I got people coming, but I'm not making any money. Can you come and look? So I went down and I said, first of all, Mark, nobody's using the register. His cousin was in the box office at the time. I don't know what to do. I said, well, it's very simple. You see, you push this button, $2. You push this button, 50 cents. And you push this button, the thing comes out. You collect the money. And we started that way. And then I said, Mark, the club next door, the place next door is empty. They just left. Why don't you take that over? We'll build a doorway through the wall, and you get licensed. And so Mark and I filled out all the papers, went to the liquor board, and eventually got licensed. And that's when things changed. I mean, once you start selling booze, you start making money.
100%.
So, and also, it didn't ruin the comedy room. It helped the comedy room. People got loose.
Yeah.
And of all the acts I've seen there, and I'm talking, Howie Mandel, Norm Macdonald, and American acts, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, they all played Yuk-Yuks. You know who was the best MC? Mark. He would walk out on stage and control that entire room. It was fascinating, and it was amazing to watch. And then he would introduce people, and they would come out, and like I said, he would bring up acts from the States, and he supported Canadian comedy 90%, and he never would ever stop he was uncensored. This was his big thing. Sometimes got him in trouble, but he was uncensored, and he would, live or die on that. And to this day, that's still how he feels.
Quick circle back. The name you were trying to come up with, who Jackie Mason went off on, Shirley Solomon.
That's it, Shirley.
Mark Weisblatt got the answer. So shout out to Mark Weisblatt on the live stream.
Yeah,
from
sure. And
12:36.
she didn't deserve it. I wonder what she's doing now.
Great question.
But anyway.
But so it's good that what I like about the live stream is you and I are like, what's that name? And then magically it just appears. What an age we live in.
That is exactly what happened with the All Night Show too. You couldn't ask a question. You couldn't do a contest without so many people replying. And it was like having a live computer.
Better than Wikipedia.
In the middle of the night at 3 a.m. because what I learned from the All Night Show is there's 3 distinct group of people. At the beginning of the night, it's stoners and people who want to see crazy stuff. And then in the middle of the night, you get an older audience of like women who've had babies, doctors who work overnight and that kind of stuff. And you'd want to show things like Passing Parade and create, sort of interesting stuff. And then at the end of the night, you'd have to show soft music. If you put rock music on at the end of the show, you'd get... And I just found a tape.
Yeah.
It's God's honest truth. I just found a tape. That's when I was listening to tapes, how I found Gary's. A tape that was on a machine at Channel 47 with people going, hey, Chuck, I love you. Send me a button. Who's Ryerson? All that kind of stuff.
Wow, it's almost like a Speaker's Corner before Speaker's Corner.
It was better than that.
Better
in
than
fact,
Speaker's
I
Corner.
painted the elevator in the building
Yeah.
called Elevator to the Stars. And I said, let's bring in people who have bands. We give them 3 minutes to do their act. The doors open. You got 3 minutes. At the end of 3 minutes, whether you're done or not, these doors come down. They're like,
Yeah.
And people loved it. And Ralph Benmergie's wife was the person I hired to, be a
First wife or second wife?
I didn't know he had a second wife.
Okay, yeah, he's on. I'm on the same boat here, Ralph.
Yeah.
So, and Ralph will be, by the way, Ralph and Brent Bambury will be together in the basement. I think next week or the week after. So I'll just promote that upcoming episode with Rabbi Ralph. But he don't know which. So I don't know. He's got a second wife now, and he's got 2 kids with the second wife, 2 kids with the first, following my blueprint. Although he might have done it first. I have to check the math on that. But any memories of Ralph Benmergie? So
Sure.
I'm going to ask you about some people who I've worked with, and
Sure.
first being Ralph Benmergie.
How do I even sum up Ralph? he's a CBC person. He's in that world. And when he was in our world, the comedy world, he would get on stage and he would do his act.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the best act in the world. It wasn't the worst act in the world. He liked it. We liked him. And he's a friend of Mark's. And then I didn't see him for years. And I understand he had a problem with cancer.
Yeah.
And I met him at some gathering, and I didn't know who he was. I couldn't identify him as Ralph Benmergui.
So let me tell you a little story on that, which is, so when I invited him over the first time, like, I wanted to talk to Ralph Benmergui because he hosted Friday night. It all comes back to Breslin here, but he hosted Friday night, and I wanted to talk to the midday guy, Ralph Benmergui, and he kind of, I don't know, hummed and hawed a bit, and then I'm like, no, man, we'll have it'll be comfortable, we'll have a good chat, you'll enjoy it. And then he shows up at my door, and he told me in a later episode that he was hesitant because he knows we're going to take a photo by the tree, and he wasn't happy with how he looked because he says his words, my Jewish nose was gone because they had to lop off a part of his nose or whatever. But he was really self-conscious about his physical appearance, and it took a lot of courage, if you will. But that was the moment where he sort of came back out of hiding, like that he showed up at my door. We had a great talk. I ended up producing his podcast for many years, and again, he's back here in about a week or so. But absolutely, he had to kind of get over the fact that he didn't quite look the way he used to because of the removing this cancer.
There are a number of people out there, Ralph being one of them, who never really encouraged or never did anything positive really to or for Yuk-Yuks. He always believed that, or at least we got the sense that he always believed that Mark was doing the wrong thing by making comics work for him and signing contracts and all the time while Ralph is working at, 2 or 3 different places. Right. So although he was a friend, although I still consider him a friend,
sure.
If I said to him, listen, in fact, I'll give you an example. I said to him, Ralph, you have a radio show. We'll give you tickets to give away. Never heard back. Doesn't believe that Yuk-Yuk is a good force in the world of comedy, in my opinion. Well, there are several people like that. Do you know Anton Leo? He's a producer at the CBC, a good friend. He was part of a comedy act, and it's a fantastic act, and he's a fantastic guy. But he also believes that Yuk-Yuk takes advantage of comics. And I don't know why he thinks that. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. We have been, for 25 years or so, we've been doing a show on Sunday nights called The Black Show with Kenny Robinson.
Of course.
And very
this
proud.
Is the Nubian show? Or is it
the Nubian Disciples of Pryor.
Right.
That's what he called it, right.
Right.
And he's a good friend, still does it. But Anton decided, or with the CBC, they were going to do a special on The Black Show. Well, can they use Yuk-Yuks? So he said, can we use Yuk-Yuks? By the way, we can find another place. I said, no, we'd like you to use Yuk-Yuks. There's a possibility you can put the Yuk-Yuk sign somewhere in the production or announce it. Well, I'll see what I can do. The show's now produced. It hasn't been aired yet, and I'll be really surprised and grateful if he shows a Yuk-Yuk sign or mentions Yuk-Yuks. But you would think somebody who worked with Yuk-Yuks all these years and is a friend of Mark's would say, hey, there's a great chance to get your logo in the picture.
Right.
We're national. We're from coast to coast. We're Canada's national stand-up comedy company, and he doesn't want to put our logo on. I just don't understand it.
Well, you mentioned to me you're retired. I said you have an hour, and you said I'm retired.
Right.
So you're no longer president of Yuk-Yuks?
No, I'm still president,
okay.
and I still sign the checks once a week.
Okay, so that's like a bad job of retiring, I suppose. If you're still president of Yuk-Yuk's comedy clubs.
Does it help if I say I'm semi-retired?
Let's call it semi-retired. Okay. And I do want to get back to a few names here, except I did, and I said you're coming on, I did hear from some comics, okay? And I'll just read one question, and this is a dose of real talk, but this question, I'm going to read it verbatim here. You ready?
Yeah.
Can you talk about how important road gigs are for comedians making a living outside of the major cities? Bringing comedy far and wide to small town folks who drive an hour or more to the nearest movie theater. Can you speak to...
Let me tell you how it works. How about that?
I'm listening.
At Yuk-Yuks now, we're not talking about when it started, because when it started, nobody knew what to do, I guess. But now, I guess we're 40 years, 30, something like that. Here's how it starts. You want to be a comic? You Some come from the Humber School of Comedy, which Mark started with Humber. Some just come from their house, their life.
Right.
And they want it, and so they get a chance to go on amateur night. And how they get selected for amateur night is we have somebody who watches the acts, and when somebody goes to them and says, "I'd like to perform," they get you're on in 3 weeks, or you're on this Tuesday, whatever that process is, and then they perform. And if they're funny, we let them continue to perform. They don't get paid, right? They're amateurs.
Right.
And they maybe have 5 or 10 minutes of funny stuff, but they're just new on the stage. And it takes time to develop an act. And as you develop your act and have more material, you fall into different categories. You could be an opener, which means you open the show. That's your slot in the show, and you get paid for that. Or you could be a middle. You're the middle of the show, right? Or you could be the feature act. And of course, you get paid more as the feature act. And then in those categories, there are a number of people. You look like you're going to ask something. Or
No, my follow-up will be, who's your all-time favorite feature act in Yuk-Yuk's history? And why is it Mike McDonald?
Well, it's certainly an amazing. I love Mike. Unfortunately, not with us, but he was, every time he got on stage, he had new material. And he had some older stuff that everybody loved to see, with a hanger on his head and playing a fake guitar. I mean, here's the thing. Most of the comics, comics sometimes say about me that I think they're just sausages in a restaurant. Right. And it's in that regard, you can't have a restaurant without it. But what you're like, how you act, not only on stage but off stage, has a lot to do with it. I mean, would you want to deal with somebody who's always a pain in the ass?
No.
And their act is okay, nothing special. In fact, if they need anything, they need stage time to make it better. And if you don't give it to them, they get upset. And in my book, I wrote a book, and in my book, there's a thing called, what's the name of the movie where people go to sleep and a pod becomes them?
The Matrix? What are we talking about here? The
they if they fall asleep, they become this new creature. Anyway, it's a famous movie. I just can't think of the title. But that's the title of the chapter in my book, because
what's the name of your book?
It's called Funny Business.
Funny Business. Okay.
I brought you a copy.
Amazing.
Makes a great fire starter, I tell people.
We're doing a gift exchange. I like
sure. So
fire starter.
So
I'll bring it camping.
So in the book, I say Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
There you go.
There you go.
There you go.
It's like that, because a comic will start as an amateur. Then they'll get actual working gigs. They get paid. And every one of the slots I told you has an amount. If you're a feature act, you might negotiate a larger amount, but there's a set amount. And the same thing with a middle and a feature and an opener. So you start out, and everything is great. You go, oh, man, you're touring me? You're going to send me to Calgary and Vancouver, Halifax? Fantastic. And then maybe a month goes by, maybe 2. They go to sleep, and they wake up, and they say, how come I'm only getting this much?
Right.
That guy is not as good as me, and he's getting more than me. He stole my act. He stole my thing. All of a sudden, they become a monster. Now,
right.
Some of them are fine. That's just people being people. Some of them, there was a line in a movie, Sunshine Boys, that says, as a comic, nobody can touch him. As a person, nobody wants to touch him.
Love this insight here. Okay, back to some names here real quick here, because we talked about Ralph Benmergui, but another valued client of mine, I produce his podcast today, Later That Same Life, Larry Fedoruk. Do you have any memories of Larry Fedoruk?
Yeah, he, not many. I don't remember his act that much, but I know he became the head of some radio station. And
he went to CFTR. He's been around. Yeah.
Yeah. And, we would love to do promotions with him. We never have. Well,
now he's a lonely podcaster like myself, but he absolutely had a pretty lengthy, successful career in radio.
He was a good comic, and we toured him, and he had a good act, but his heart was elsewhere. It's a tough
you want to be
thing
real, but another guy whose heart was elsewhere is. Do you have any memories of humble Howard Glassman?
No.
No memories of Humble Howard Glassman. Okay, well, he went off to California and everything. Okay. And last but not least, because I love talking to him on Toronto Mike, John Wing Jr.
Oh, yeah. Well, he was on one of those shows, the best, what's the show in the States? America's Funniest Comic.
Right, that's right.
It wasn't really that show. It was like one like it. And I thought he was going to win.
Last Comic Standing or something.
No,
like
it was
that.
actually, it was
America's Got Talent?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was doing well. He didn't win. He's fantastic. He's always funny. There are so many comics that are really fantastic, and I really thought that was his shot, and he deserves it.
Well, let me just drop the biggest name of all. We did reference Howie Mandel earlier, but there's a comic who kind of famously on Toronto Mike, Mark Breslin came on. I asked him about this comic, and Mark told me that when he saw this comic perform on the Yuk-Yuk stage, he was completely underwhelmed and did not think this guy would make it. I am speaking of Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey. I know. Mark likes to tell the story of how he got him off stage with a hook. and it's a shame because he was a good guy. His father used to come down and watch his act all the time, and I'd have to be on television to do an imitation of him because it was like every night he'd go, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you," and he could be anybody. His face would change. He deserved
Clint
everything
Eastwood.
he got.
I know. I remember now thinking of those improvised. Yeah, he was great.
Sammy Davis Jr. He could make his face twist, and then. But the thing is, I couldn't get him on the phone now. I doubt if he'd even. But Howie Mandel, different story.
You
Great
can get
guy.
Howie on the phone. Okay, call him up. Let's ask him some questions.
I don't think I will.
Let's just go ahead. Sorry.
But he's a really great guy, and he comes back to Toronto very often because that's where his family is.
Yeah.
And he never turned being a big shot, if you know what I mean. In fact, can I tell you Howie Mandel's story?
Yeah, I love it.
On our 25th anniversary, we decided that we wanted to do a big special on with the Comedy Network, and we decided we wanted to do it in Ottawa because it was the country's, capital.
Right.
So we did, and Howie was going to be the master of ceremonies, and 9/11 happened, and it happened, I don't know, a couple of weeks before the show. So he said, "Nobody's flying. I can't come up there." We said, "Well, planes are flying now, but I understand." He said, "Listen, I will, why don't we do this? I'll stay here and we'll get a satellite and you'll throw to me and I'll announce the show and then, and we'll do that." And we just couldn't afford it. Well, he actually got on a plane, came here and did the show, and he didn't have to. And I don't think we'll ever, we'll never forget him for that. I mean, he saved
amazing.
the show. Oh, yeah. And it was a wonderful show. And he did a great job. And it's funny, I have a picture in my house of me and him shaking hands and hugging. One, he's bald, like you know him now. And one, he's not, like when I first met him. That's the Howie Mandel story.
That's a great story.
He's a good guy.
With Howie Mandel here. And you did work with Jim Carrey on was it the Yuk-Yuk's Great Canadian Laugh-Off?
Yes. And he did a television.
And the People's Comedy Festival.
Yeah, he did a television show for us. He's fantastic. He's a performer. It's just, I can't say he's a friend.
Right. Well, yeah, like you said, you can't get him on the phone, but you could get a hold of Howie Mandel. All right, go ahead.
We can get in touch with anybody, but if we wanted Jim Carrey, we'd have to go through 8 people, I'm sure. And Russell Peters, great friend, nice guy, wrote the introduction to my book, and but all of a sudden he wasn't with us anymore. His brother was managing him,
Clayton.
Clayton.
Yeah, he's been over.
And, he's been on too?
You know why? He went to high school with Ivor Hamilton, who's on the panel. That will happen at 888 Young on 1st of December.
Who is Ivor Hamilton?
Ivor Hamilton's a CFNY music guy, so that'll be for like when we get to the CFNY part and the police picnic and all that stuff. And it'll all come back to Rob Pruce and the Spoon. So Rob, if you're listening, it's gonna come back to you. But yeah, he's the for the CFNY say. I got what's interesting. So I'm doing this thing. I don't know. Are you getting paid for this panel?
No.
No, I'm not getting paid either.
No.
But I'm excited to do it. But I was told.
Well, lucky I didn't tell you the truth.
If you afterwards, if I find out, Jeff, you're getting paid, I'm going to go to Derek and say,
I will always make $15 less than you.
You know what? Let me see. You're going to owe them $15
That's
if
right.
I do that, man.
For Gary Topp, I would pay money to do it, really.
But there's like, it's got to be under 60 minutes. And I was saying, okay, so you got Ivor Hamilton on that stage, Gary Cormier, Colin Brunton, Jeff Silverman, and then of course the star of the show is there, Gary Topp. I said 60 minutes is going to go by. I mean, we'll start off on the Roxy and it'll be okay. 60 minutes is up. We haven't got you to the New Yorker yet, but anyways, it's going to go quick. But Ivor Hamilton's the CFNY guy.
I hear that
for David Marsden.
I hear they're adding a second show. I said a show. What, this is the Gary Topp Experience.
I heard about the second show, but I was actually not invited to the second show. So
I don't even know what a second show would be. I didn't think it was a show.
I think I joked with Colin. They're going to replace me with Strombo. That's what they're going to do. They're going to go big on that second show here. Can we dispel this? I don't know if you can even speak to this, but Jim Carrey, there's a rumor out there because we talk about the show, and I don't even know if you'll remember this show, but it was called Just Like Mom. Fergie Oliver hosted it from Agincourt, the CTV studios up there. This is like late 70s, early 80s thing. Any memory of Just Like Mom? No, you're forgiven for that. But there is a rumor that Jim Carrey was originally recruited to host Just Like Mom. I'm just going to dispel the myth based on the fact he would be like 18 years old at this time. But since you don't remember Just Like Mom, you're not going to have any insight into whether Jim Carrey was offered the hosting job at Just Like Mom before Fergie Oliver. You have no idea.
I really don't have any idea.
You're off the hook on that one, Jeff. Okay.
When was that? Anyway, was that
early 80s? I guess I had an exact year.
I think there were a lot of comics who actually made it by breaking away from Yuk-Yuks at a certain time and going off and doing their own thing. So it's very possible that they did that. You know, a lot of.
Well, I feel like my source for this is a gentleman named Gary Chowan who was cutting hair for like shows like Bizarre. Gary Chowan. He still cuts hair in Yorkville. By the way, he was Cher's personal. It's quite a story, the Gary Chowan episode. But I think he's my source for this.
Andrew Chowan, who used to work reservations. No, I don't know.
Okay, so you've been amazing. Like I've learned so much. I find this conversation just fascinating. But I'll just wrap up with some of the comics questions that came in, and then it might be putting you on the seat. But who are your favorite comedians that are currently on the Yuk-Yuks roster?
I don't know. And I'll tell you why. I told you I was sort of semi-retired.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a comedy club. I haven't been to one of our clubs, I would say, in 5 years. When I started with Mark Breslin, I used to say, I like that guy. You should use that guy.
Right.
Hey, why are you using that guy?
Yeah.
And Mark said something that I'll never forget. He said, Jeff, don't tell Picasso where to put an eye.
So you're not responsible. I know
them. I deal with them because I sign their checks.
You signed the Mike Bullard checks, for example, who we recently lost.
Yes. And again, great guy. And at one point, after using Yuk-Yuks to be known and to get around and to make money, he had his show, and he worked with Mark on that show. And but something happened to him. I don't know what happened to him. He was always sort of a braggadocio kind of guy. I mean, that was his act when he got up on stage. He would always say, where you from, and make fun and stuff like that.
Sure.
When he got his show, I thought, this is the biggest chance you'll ever have. National coast-to-coast television show, and there's no competition in this country. But somehow it went dark. I don't know. I mean,
as I recall, like it was a CTV show that was filmed at Gretzky's, I want to say, 99 Blue Jays Way, originally?
No, originally.
Before it went to Masonic Temple?
No, well, I only know it going to the Masonic Temple and being there and him doing well. But again, Mark Breslin, he doesn't like censored comedy, and he likes things that are dark. And Bullard started off that way. And I just felt that the show wasn't light enough. I said to Mark many times, who's the musical act? And is that going to... He didn't care about that stuff.
Right.
Like, he wanted to make sure there was a guy in a cage who said things.
Right.
What's the set like? So that's the way they operated, and I couldn't do that. I needed to know everything that happened with the all-night show. I mean, I was the person in charge.
Love it so much. Fascinating. The future of Yuk-Yuks, I know that you're semi-retired now, but we
have 18 clubs, coast to coast. We're growing. The last club we opened was in Winnipeg. We now have signed a deal with a company to do television shows and stuff, which hasn't happened yet. They just apparently they're on the stock market. And the name of their company is Icarus Capital. And we're talking to them about making TV shows and stuff. And we have several people, for many years, we've had several people who wanted to buy the company. That might happen. In the meantime, Mark and I are happy. We've created this engine that continues to run. He worries about the fuel that goes into it. And I make sure that maintenance is done, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. But wait, confirmation that Bullard's show did start at Gretzky's and then was CTV bought 888 Young, where we're going to be on December 1st. And Bullard was kind of the main attraction at the Masonic Temple there when he moved his show there. So it starts at Gretzky's and then moves over. But he left for Global, I want to say, and that's when he
got screwed.
Yeah, right.
He got screwed because he left because he thought it was going to give him more everything, more freedom, more money. But as soon as it didn't do the numbers, he was out. And at CTV, they would have stuck with him because it was their baby.
Right. And then they ended up syndicating or getting the American show, the John, what's the, why am I stumbling on his name? The famous news guy, the talk show that was like, anyway, they brought in a show that destroyed Bullard in the ratings, and then the rest is history. Bill Braille has a lot to say about, interviewing Mike Bullard at this time and how he seemed to be a broken man at this point. So it only got worse for Mike, and then he had an untimely end.
And he's not the type to take advice. And, his brother is in California.
Pat.
Yeah, and you would never guess they were brothers if they were side by side. So,
he's got a half-brother who is lead singer of the Downchild Blues Band. Did you know that, Chuck Jackson?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah, I just had a guy they're just wrapping up themselves here. Okay, so the nice comment that just came in for you from Canada Kev says, I had a lot of fun organizing a couple of fundraisers for kids hockey and baseball teams with Yuk-Yuk.
Yes,
so
we do that. We have a whole department that does fundraisers for, all kinds of sports organizations, and it works out well. We give them tickets, which they sell to their people, right? And that way they raise their money, and we help fill the audience on a slow night. But it certainly raises money we've done it for many, many charities. Continue to.
that name I struggled to come up with. It came to me now. Jon Stewart, of course. So that Jon Stewart show was syndicated by CTV to go up against Bullard's Global show, and
I did not know that.
Canadians preferred Jon Stewart, I guess, over the new Mike Bullard show there. Okay, my friend, we are going to see each other on December 1st, and now I've got, maybe Gary Topp will be surprised. I spend all 60 minutes talking to you with all the follow-up questions I have. But is there any story you wanted to share that we didn't get to? This is your chance before I play us out here.
Well, I'll tell you a Gary Topp story.
Please.
We decided at one point that we wanted to do some spectacular promotion. And at that time, the CNE had a promotion where you stayed on a Ferris wheel for a certain amount of time. And there were thousands of people. So Gary and I said to each other, hey, we can do something like that. So we found an Australian guy named Jim Montesino. We had T-shirts made. We put ads in the paper. Can he do it?
Right.
101 hours playing the piano. Wow. And it started out at the New Yorker Theater with the piano facing the screen, and he played. And, of course, after, 30 hours or something, he was, somewhere else. He'd say, I'm hungry. We'd go out and get him a sandwich. He'd say, I don't want any food. He had a manager, and his manager gave him 1/4 glass of ammonia and 3/4 water, and the guy drank it.
My God.
To wake him up.
Wouldn't that kill you?
You would think so. We had a chair. We cut a hole in the chair, so if he had to go to the bathroom, he could go through the chair. And it was Gary's job, and mine sometimes, to get the bag and take it out and put it in the garbage. So the end of the story is he did it for 3 days, almost 4 days.
But
Nobody came.
Oh, my God.
Nobody came. And he was facing the stage. So what we did after the second day was we started running anything that was free, like trailers of people in Florida on skis and stuff. And he was just out of it. Now, here's one part of the story.
Yeah.
There was a woman who had great affection for him and started filming him and made a film out of him doing it. And that woman is the woman who does Degrassi Street. And the name of her company is Playing with Time.
Is that Linda?
I don't know her
Linda
name.
Schuler?
Maybe.
I think her name is.
Playing with Time. And the end of the story is after 4 days. And by the way, every morning we would bring him to the piano.
Yeah.
Every late in the afternoon, we'd take him with a little piano around his neck. He'd keep playing, get on a truck that had a piano on it, and he would play in the truck on the way to the Roxy, where he'd get off with the little piano and play. He did that for 4 days. And when he got done, and nobody came, and it was one of the worst things we ever did, he did not have health insurance. We had to take a whip around. Maybe Colin will remember this. We had to take a whip around to get him enough money to put him somewhere. Jim Montesino and the record that he broke.
That story is unbelievable, and it's got a Degrassi tie to it.
And the
record he broke.
The record that he was going for, the Guinness Book of Records, was broken one day. One day after we sent him to the hospital.
Honestly, that story is incredible.
You ask Gary. I still have the shirt with him playing the piano saying, "Can he do it?"
Can you even stay awake that long? That's humanly possible. Did he get like cat naps? Was he allowed any cat naps?
No, he just kept playing. And of course it would be dink, dink, bing, bing, dink. That was the piano after 3 days.
And nobody came, and then it got broken the next day. And
Nobody
he didn't have
came
health
to
insurance.
either theater. And, we had ads on the paper. We had Chum. We had Chum promoting it.
Well, I was thinking of Chum when you were talking about the roller coaster thing, because Mike Cooper was set the record for longest period of time on the roller coaster, or DJing or something. I don't know.
Larry Wilson.
Larry
Wilson, I think, worked with Chum.
Wilson worked. Yeah.
I don't know what happened to him, but he would help promote it.
Dude,
Anyway,
this was awesome.
These were moments in time.
But we're capturing these stories now for future generations to learn about Toronto in the 70s and 80s. And
Everybody who's listening, think of this. This, right now, is your past. You might not know it for 10 years, 20 years, but you'll look back at all the crazy stuff that happened and you'll be glad.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home.
Absolutely. You got to lie somewhere.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,583rd show. You can follow me at torontomike.com. Thank you to Rob Pruce for the new closing theme song, his rendition of Rosie and Gray by Lowest of the Low. Love it, Rob. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta. Don't leave without your lasagna, Jeff. RecycleMyElectronics.ca, Raymond James Canada, Moneris, you've got your speaker, and Ridley Funeral Home. I'll find out on December 1st what Jeff measured with his Ridley Funeral Home tape measure. See you all tomorrow when my special guest is a sports broadcaster named Victoria Mateish. Looking forward to that. See you all then.
Thank you, Mike.